Post-occupancy. 25 years ago, Stuart Brand wrote, "One of architecture's most adaptive devices is misnamed by the traumatic instant of letting users into the building." The very nomenclature of the post-occupancy evaluation displays the divisive gap between the two stages of a building's life, construction and occupancy. A highly underutilized practice that will remain underutilized until we challenge the deep-rooted assumptions it is built upon. We must confront architecture's attitude towards consumption, maintenance, and weathering in order to critically analyze the dialogue between architecture, occupancy, and time. The following case studies will present us with clues on how to transform our discipline. In her Maintenance Art Manifesto, artist Merle Lederman-Euclides writes, "There are two basic systems, development and maintenance. Development is pure individual creation, the change, the new. Maintenance, keep the dust off the pure individual creation, sustain the change, preserve the new." She then asks, do you consider yourself avant-garde? What is your relationship between your work and freedom? Is your art free of maintenance? Picking up where she left off, I would like to ask, can maintenance free architecture? What maintenance work supports the art of architecture? Is that work any less of an art? Couldn't the act of preservation be an act of creation? Euclides proclaimed that the avant-garde is supported by the complex and unacknowledged dance of maintenance, and those that practice the jobs we have deemed as mundane have a unique agency. Maybe the acknowledgement and elevation of maintenance within architecture can provide the architect with freedom and agency. Pennsylvania Fruit Auction and Sales Building. This one-story building, built in 1926 by the Pennsylvania Railroad Company, sits in a neighborhood in Pittsburgh called the Strip District, and served as the hub for the industry of local wholesale produce distribution that prospered there. At a quarter-mile long, the terminal received freight trains along its length, delivering produce to the over 70 wholesalers that occupied the individual bays. In the 1950s, the small independent wholesalers began to feel the shifts of the produce industry as big box grocery stores pushed them out of business. What followed were years of neglect and vacancy. In 2019, the building began the process of a $62.6 million renovation. But what has been preserved? What do we find behind the symbolic facade? As a societal artifact, the building illustrates a shift from local, sustainable consumption to mass, mindless consumption. However, if we look closely, we might be able to understand the spatial characteristics of this architecture that fostered the individuality of the local and allowed it to thrive. Perhaps through this understanding, we could move back to a space of mindful consumption. In Cuba, cars have been frozen in time. In the 1960s, the United States placed an embargo on the island that left the owners of American cars without any access to the parts their vehicles required. In the 60 years since, an extreme resourcefulness was cultivated, as Cubans kept their pre-60s cars running through any technology necessary. Diesel tractor suspensions and engines were adapted to fit Chevrolets and Cadillacs. Parts from other cars were sculpted to the mechanic's specific needs. This case study begs the question, what happens when the systems of mass production fail? More importantly, in its absence, what can we see that it has robbed us of? David Leatherbarrow and Mohsen Mostafavi wrote, "The great irony of mass production was that the ease of repetition seems to have increased instances of unmodified repetition and reduced reinvention." In the face of a necessity born out of societal strife, the Cubans responded with a technology that reconceptualized material tectonics and fabrication. A loose-fit adaptation was created, a process that embraces additional repair. Through this domestication of fabrication, one can find an understanding of how an object that is repaired is not lesser. Rather, it has been elevated through an inventive dialogue with the hand that enriches it with a capacity for memory. The radical cousin of the concept of the live-work is the cultural phenomenon of the live-build. Conceived in rural America during the Great Depression, the impoverished used whatever immediate resources they had to mark the boundary of a home, with the hope to build more in stages as the money came available. This radical process of intertwining occupation and construction manifests a time sensitivity and use sensitivity that results in a building that fits like a piece of clothing. These small vernacular homes assumed the inevitability of expansion. They are experts in growing in stages. Their motto is, inhabit early, build forever. In contrast is the home of today, the modern McMansion. It is the antithesis of the ethics of the live-build, and yet it has aestheticized its image. What was once a process specific to the poor, symbolic of a slow and arduous trudge towards economic growth, has been codified as the image of accumulation, a new symbol for the upper middle class. However, the sins of the McMansion are more than skin deep. Overly complicated in its conception, it makes construction and maintenance difficult, and ironically, further additions difficult or impossible. The live-build challenges societal notions of agency through the combination of construction and habitation, but it complies with mass production in its use of standardized building materials that are designed to demand skills and technical know-how in their use in construction. What if the materials used to construct were challenged in combination with the dichotomy of construction and habitation? Could architecture be transformed by new materials, ones that lend themselves to proper maintenance and intervention? Sarah Wigglesworth presents an unrequited love letter to the live-build, a solution in stock Orchard Street that no one was looking for. The house mocks the idea of the building as finished product. Its walls are clad and constructed in the domestic: quilts, sandbags, straw bales. Materials that lend themselves to intervention and agency. It is an architecture that accepts the rituals and mess of domestic life through its juxtaposition of farm and industrial products, but also through its organization. The plan presents itself as a dining table, with the potential to be reordered in a continual refitting of the space to its occupant.